For me, guys, this summer is about more than just creating depth for a European push. It's about closing the gap on those above us. And I worry a little bit whether players that we're linked with, like a Conor Gallagher, really do that. I think that they might be of a certain level. They might be our level, which is no disrespect to them or to him or to us. But I think if we're going to kick on to the next level, I think you need at least 1 or 2 players in this summer that are gap closers as we level up to try to take on the likes of Manchester City and Liverpool and, dare I say it, Arsenal over the 38-game full season. Morning everybody, how you doing? Welcome back to the Spurs Talk Show. I hope you're all happy and healthy doing the things you love, with those that you love doing it with. I'm with some guys that have got some bad ideas around transfer policy today. Bugsy Malone's up there saying hello to her friend. She'll be down in a second. How are you? I hope you're all happy and healthy doing the things you love with those that you love doing them with. Please do me a favour, guys, hit the like button for me on the video if you enjoy the content. Hit the subscribe button whilst you're at it if you haven't already. And even if you have, guys, double check you still are. YouTube are playing all sorts of shenanigans. Like 100 subscribers just dropped off the channel a couple of days ago. And I spoke to YouTube about it, and they reckon it's because some people who maybe use YouTube TV and don't really log in too often, they log in to subscribe to the channel. And then if they then go back to YouTube TV or whatever and they don't do much activity over a couple of months, then they get dropped off. So, I don't know. It is what it is. It doesn't matter. Hit the notification bell and drop a comment. Let me know your thoughts on today's topic. Guys, we're back. First of all, apologies for the absence, but there's been nothing to bore you with. The nonsense could temporarily halt. But now we're back. Palace on Saturday. I'm excited. I really am excited. I think it's going to be a good game, a better game than I think it would have been under Roy Hodgson. Shout out to him. I hope he's doing better and healthier. But he's moved on, retired probably. And Oliver Glasner's in place. And you know what? Generally speaking, at the tail end of a manager's like sort of time at a football club, things get a little bit kind of dogged and they tuck in and hang on and they don't really play their best sort of football or best front foot football. And then when a new manager comes in, obviously players have a little bit more freedom in the absence of the manager having the time to implement a new vision immediately. That template for their strategy going forward hasn't quite been baked in yet. Results in the ability for players just to play. They're playing for their position in front of their new manager's eyes. And so you get a little bit more kind of throwing caution to the wind. Now, sometimes that results in a manager bounce or whatever with good results, which could be a concern from a Tottenham perspective. But ultimately, I think it will play into our hands a little bit if they're playing more front foot football than they otherwise would do, because of late Tottenham have been the victim of sucker punches really, against teams that sit in and counter press us, counter punch us, and take advantage of the exploit the vulnerabilities of our system when our front 5 or 6 are not really clicking enough. So against Palace, I'm expecting a bit more of an open game, and that should suit us. So it should be a good game. I look forward to seeing you all there. And listen, if we are going to finish top 4, then we need 8 wins. I played with that calculator where you can put in all the predicted results. And I had Tottenham finishing 5th. Aston Villa 1 point ahead of us, but us keeping Manchester United at bay. And we shall see whether 5th place is enough for the Champions League or Europa League at the end of the season, depending on what happens with the European coefficients. In any event, guys, whatever version of European football we're going to be playing next year, and I think it's pretty safe to say, absent some ridiculous drop-off in form, that we will be playing some version of Europa League or Champions League, then we're going to need more depth in certain areas. We're going to need more first team strength in others. And so the reason why I'm bringing up this name again today is because he's been mentioned again by Ben Jacobs, but I'm not going to be talking specifically about Conor Gallagher. Maybe I'll use him as the example, but really it's the point that I'm trying to get at, which is of the level of players that we're trying to acquire now. So Ben Jacobs from Sky Sports fame asked about James Garner and his links to Tottenham, and he said, I think Tottenham appreciate the player but aren't going to make a move. which is kind of just like a politician's answer for there's no noise there. But he said that he thinks that Tottenham are dead set, 100% focused on trying to get Conor Gallagher out of Chelsea. And I don't really want to bang on about Conor Gallagher. You know how I feel about the guy. But where I do want to take it is that ultimately, as much as I find it a regressive kind of a nonsense statement to say when you're trying to give your opinion on a fan channel, if Ange wants him, I want him. I do, right? Like ultimately, over the last couple of years, I think that our scouting department has succeeded more often than they've failed. I think that they have got the overwhelming majority of decisions right with regards to young players. But when it comes to buying ready now players that are, familiar with the Premier League, I think the question marks still exist. I look at Richarlison, Brennan Johnson, and then I wonder about people like Conor Gallagher. And I think, what is the level that we're at? What is his level? And what level are we trying to be at? And I land on a sort of answer of, I feel like those sorts of players are Tottenham's level-ish. Right? They're somewhere around that team, that group where they're very good players but not world-class players. And if you want to get to the next level, if you want to be competing with Liverpool and City and, dare I say it, Arsenal, then how much can you rely on always finding the best young talent? And look, we've got very, very fortunate, or been very, very impressive with our identification of Destiny Udogie and with people like Papsar, and hopefully with the likes of Vescovic and Ash Phillips and those guys that are coming through. But I think you need to sprinkle in some sort of top tier talent alongside it. And look, Tottenham's FFP situation is far healthier than most, it really is. But it still is what it is, right? You still have a 500 million revenue club, and in the next 12 to 18 to 24 months, you're going to be seeing the UEFA limitations on how much you can spend as being ultimately falling at 70% of your revenue cap. And I don't think that Tottenham are going to be able to suddenly move that revenue number to £1 billion anytime soon. I feel like most of the juice from the squeeze has been found within the stadium revenues. And so, without any kind of new catalyst to meaningfully raise those revenue numbers, then you have to kind of make do with what you've got. And obviously one of those mechanisms that we haven't really tapped into is better player trading. So maybe selling some of the better young players that we've got that have come through technically as pure profit, and sort of selling them that way. But that sort of stuff is usually 2 or 3 years away anyway. There's no one that's visible on our books right now that you would be happy to sell for more money than what you paid for them without seeing a drop off in our quality. And so I just look at people like Conor Gallagher and other names that we're kind of linked with and think, is that going to be the catalyst? Does Manchester City, if Manchester City needed a 6/8/10, whatever, this utility player, if they did, would they go and buy Conor Gallagher? Well, you can make the argument that they did go and buy Calvin Phillips, but it didn't work out. And pretty soon, Manchester City have tried to they've recognised that faux pas and have moved on and replaced him. Would Liverpool buy a Conor Gallagher? Maybe, maybe not. Arsenal went and bought Kai Havertz, right, who's a good example. Manchester United went and bought Mason Mount, who's probably even more of an example because he also is homegrown and had 1 year left on his contract, and yet Chelsea got major money for him. And the 360 viewpoint here for me is, if Conor Gallagher is going to cost 50-60 million pound, because that's what Chelsea are going to use Mason Mount for as the precedent, homegrown, English international, and 1 year left on his contract, didn't affect the price too much. If Tottenham really want him, rather than just taking advantage of the situation, then they're going to have to bake that into their negotiation skills, right? Chelsea are going to maybe try and stay strong on it. I just worry or wonder whether or not, with the revenues sort of being where they are, and Tottenham still having so much work to do to get a squad that's capable of competing in Europe next year, I would just wonder and worry whether or not we might overpay for Conor Gallagher and then face the kind of Kai Havertz scenario where Arsenal fans, if Arsenal end up not winning the league, then are those fans going to turn and say, we overspent on Kai Havertz, who didn't have any kind of specific role to play, a little bit of everything, kind of journeyman throughout the squad, and then consequently they didn't have enough money to go and drop on the Ivan Toney that they needed in January, or insert whoever here, right? And for me, it's about being super smart. If you can get a Conor Gallagher for 30 million, or if you can factor in that you're going to be able to sell Højbjerg or Lo Celso, who are also in the last year of their contract, and make room in the squad and also create budget, then fine. But I don't necessarily think that's as easier said than done. Sorry, let me say that again. I think sometimes that is easier said than done. Arsenal fans think that in the summer they're just going to be able to sell Emil Smith-Rowe, Ramsdale, Eddie Nketiah and Lokonga and raise 100 million because they've just figured out that's what the players are worth. I think Tottenham fans, we should know how difficult it's been to sell B-Tech level players into Europe who don't really have the money. And into the Premier League, you're not going to get a pretty price because the Premier League clubs are all going to be very much aware of who is and who isn't struggling with FFP, and the negotiations are going to factor all that sort of accounting side of the game into it. And so I'm not really sure where I'm going with this video, guys. I'm sure this is probably just waffle, but I feel like Conor Gallagher, to me, seems for all intents and purposes like he is Tottenham's number one kind of target for the summer, a statement signing. And for a number of reasons, I'm really worried about that being the choice. It only makes sense to me if you can do a number of the following. If you can make sure that the price is no higher than, say, 30 million, which I think is going to be very difficult to do. 2 is you can convince the player that he actually wants to come here and play for a team that he probably grew up absolutely despising. 3 is whether or not you can liquidate a Højbjerg or a Lo Celso or whatever to make space in the squad and chip away at the outlay. And 4 is that there's no one else that's going to come in and sort of upset that apple cart in the negotiations, given the fact that you have Chelsea season finishing, a 2-week break for the players, then the Euros, and Conor Gallagher will be gone there, and they've got to probably try and get things done before the June 30th deadline. So is all that stuff going to happen quickly enough? I worry about the complexity of that deal and whether or not it's going to level us up anyway to the level that we're trying to be at. As I say, I've got absolute faith and confidence in Tottenham's recent scouting endeavours, but in the most part, those impressive elements of it have come from identifying players that perhaps the average armchair fan are not too aware of. Players like Udogie, players like Papsar, players like Mickey van der Ven and Vicario. Whereas when we've gone into the Premier League for our value, with the exception of James Maddison, haven't been that impressed. You know, Manor Solomon, I know he's been injured a lot, but hasn't really done much when I've seen him. Richarlison, you know how I feel about him. Brennan Johnson, question marks. And so if we're going to continue to go back, dip into the Premier League, I think the complexity of the deal is one thing, but then even if the deal happens, does it really make you a team that can then close the gap? This is what Ange said, right? Ange said a few weeks back, he's like, it's not, the other teams that are ahead of us are not standing still, they are improving, so we have to improve quicker and further than the teams above us in order to close the gap. It's like a car driving down the motorway at 90 miles an hour, and you're a copper who's trying to chase them down to pull them over. You have to be going at 110 miles an hour just to close the gap, and it's still going to take time. So it's not easy, and I just wonder whether players like Conor Gallagher ultimately help in that cause, in that case. Not so sure. That's not to say that I don't dislike the player, or I dislike the player. I don't. I think he's a good player on his day, but I just see him as someone who can be brilliant. He's a workhorse. You know what you're going to get from him. Someone who runs tirelessly and works really hard, and will probably suit the system. I agree, it will suit the system. But he also has the propensity to play the ball sideways 99 times out of 100. I'm not sure about his peripheral vision to sort of view the game and see those kind of opportunities that are not right in front of his face. I don't know. I just think it would be awesome, considering how much hard work we've done, if the statement signing of this summer could be someone that really elevates. A number 9 or a winger or another midfielder who, I know they're not going to happen, but when you hear the likes of a Frankie de Jong, you kind of go, oh wow. Or a Josh Kimmich in the 6, you go, oh, hang on, that's a gap closer. That's not just a depth creator, that is a gap closer. I'm excited to find out what happens this summer, and that's 15 minutes of your life you're never going to get back, guys. I'm not even sure why I did this video. It's probably terrible. I do apologise. I'll see you on the next one. Like, subscribe and comment, and as always, bye bye.